Now, Sonoma Land Trust is a local nonprofit that protects land in Sonoma County for everyone's benefit. We've been doing this work since 1976 and have protected over 58,000 acres in our county so far. We can accomplish our work through the generosity of our members and contributors. So thank you to all of you who are helping us protect beautiful Sonoma County for future generations. As we pursue our mission of conserving land in Sonoma County, we recognize that we stand upon the unceded ancestral land of many Indigenous peoples. We honor their knowledge, care, and stewardship of this special place across the ages and acknowledge the deep and lasting damage that colonization has inflicted on them. We embrace our responsibility to learn from and protect their cultural and traditional connections to the land. Now, I would like to introduce our presenter for tonight. Jenny Harrow-Keeler is a certified nature and forest therapy guide with a master's in integrative health studies, where she wrote her thesis on the practice of forest bathing. She is the founder of Eco Wisdom and the co-founder and executive director of the local nonprofit Integrative Healers Action Network, supporting trauma-informed care for communities impacted by climate disasters. With over 7 years of guiding forest therapy experiences, Jenny's mission is to help people remember their innate relationship to the natural world, using it to foster healing, clarity, and resilience for both individual and collective healing. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Anya. I'm so grateful to be here.
We're so happy to have you.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking this time and this opportunity to join this presentation on forest bathing. Thank you, Sonoma Land Trust, for inviting me. I'm honored and I'm grateful to be here. I'm going to give a quick introduction of who I am. Let's see. Uh, so As Anya mentioned, I am a nature and forest therapy guide. I've been guiding forest bathing experiences for about 7 years now. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of a local nonprofit, Integrative Healers Action Network. Currently, we're focusing on providing integrative health and wellness programs for our local firefighters. Um, Master's degree in integrative health studies. I got to really dive deep into the fields of ecotherapy and ecopsychology. And then I got to write my final project, my thesis on the practice of forest bathing. And I am very passionate about helping empower individuals and organizations with tools to help build resilience and support both mental and physical health and well-being. Um, so Before I dive in, I'll be giving an overview of what this practice is, some of the origins of it. Um, you know, this is something that I wanted to start by saying that I believe is innate to all of us as humans. And I start all of my sessions this way when I'm guiding forest bathing, forest therapy sessions in person. I like to let people know that yes, maybe some of the information I'll be sharing, some of the research or some of the clinical perspectives might be new, but this is something that is old. This is a practice that is ancient. And I just like to tell people that I think that my role as a nature and forest therapy guide is to help people remember. In modern world in 2024, we're busy people, and I'm going to talk about that in the presentation of how we've kind of just lost connection to the natural world, to the rhythms, the harmony that come from that. And so the beauty of forest bathing is that this is a practice that we all have inside of us. We've just collectively forgotten. Um, and so by tapping into this practice, which is all about slowing things down, working with our senses as a way to connect to the natural world, to the forest. This is an opportunity for us to go back into this deep, deep knowing that we are citizens of this planet, that we belong here, that we, you know, had a time and place where we were living in harmony and this is something that the research is really focusing on the benefits for human health. And I got to explore this a little bit in my thesis of how I believe that the more that we can remember why it's so helpful in healing to reconnect with nature, that hopefully it inspires uh, this deep desire to want to protect and conserve, like so the amazing work that the Sonoma Land Trust is doing around conservation, that we care about giving back, that we build and develop this relationship of reciprocity, that nature isn't this there for us to take from, and even in this healing health context, that it's not just a resource for us to use, but that we can come back into this remembrance of reconnection and reciprocity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the origins of forest bathing in this form, in this more modern form of the context of why, if you've heard of this term before, it's growing in popularity and recognition. The origins in this form come from Japan from the early 1980s. The Japanese word is Shinrin-yoku, which loosely translates to bathing in the forest atmosphere. And so I'll get questions from people sometimes. The bathing throws people off a little bit in the beginning of they ask questions of are we in a bathtub in the middle of the forest? Do I need my bathing suit? And even though that sounds fun, I let them know that the bathing is more about opening up and receiving the healing benefits. It's very similar in concept if you've experienced or heard of sound bathing before. This is a practice that is all about tuning into the natural healing benefits of being in nature and being in a forest and to simply open up and slow down enough to receive. One of the reasons this started in Japan in the early 1980s, they were having a national health crisis in which people were starting to move into the cities in large numbers. Think back to the 1980s in Japan, this was one of the world's first big technology booms. Um, and so we saw for the first time, like people coming into the city, they're coming into work in this tech field. And what was happening all around the same time was that there was this huge uptick in stress related illness. There was this correlation between chronic stress and chronic disease. And there was even a new word coined in Japanese called karoshi, which loosely translates to death from overworking. And so the government in Japan took this all really seriously and started to explore different healthcare interventions to support the population with this uptick in chronic stress and chronic illness. So they invested millions of dollars to conduct clinical trials to see what's happening to human health when we not only go into nature, but specifically into a forest. They were really interested in the properties of what's happening when we interact with trees. And not only just being in nature, but doing it in this very slow and mindful way. In Japan, there's a deep and rich history of Shinto, their indigenous belief and practices that everything is alive, the trees, the rocks, the water, and then Zen Buddhism, these old and rich ancient traditions of meditation, of bringing our mind and body and spirit into coherence. And so this is some of the inspiration of why this practice started and where it came from in this form. It's been growing around the globe. I just got back from South Korea a couple of months ago. I got to attend the first World Forum on Forest Therapy. There were practitioners and researchers from all around the world. We got to go visit, and South Korea has been really picking up where what Japan started in terms of integrating this into their national public health plan. In Japan, they have started prescribing forest bathing to patients who are experiencing chronic stress or illness related to stress. Japan, they have over 60 nationally designated and federally funded healing forests. There's doctors on site. They'll take your vitals before and after to do a little bit of the biofeedback, measuring things like blood pressure and heart rate variability. And then participants are taken out into the forest with a guide, which is what I do in terms of just helping people slow down, open their senses. In South Korea, they have dozens and dozens of federally funded forest therapy institutes where they're utilizing some of the practices of forest bathing and taking it even beyond, integrating um, other healing practices into the context of bringing people back into nature, making it accessible, making it feel safe. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in the presentation about why we need so much help in reconnecting with nature. Um, Not everyone, but a lot of humans right now have are just not spending as much time out there, and they've kind of forgotten how to interact with nature in a way that we can really utilize the healing benefits at its most. So before I talk more about some of the research behind it, I just want to name, what does forest bathing mean? What is this practice? And so at its core, forest bathing is really utilizing mindfulness and meditation techniques to engage through the senses as a way to connect with nature. So if you're in a guided session, participants are guided on how to slow down, whether it's through the breath or through their senses. An emphasis on disconnecting from technology and just really scheduling time to take a break from life's daily stressors. It's sad that we have to schedule time to do this, but life can get busy. We're fast people. We're constantly on the go. Um, and so forest bathing is a practice that's really encouraging people to work with forests as a tool for therapeutic relaxation. And once you learn some of the basic tools and techniques, it's very cost effective. It's a very simple way to manage stress in the long run. Um, it's not a substitute for clinical interventions when needed for different mental and physical health conditions, but it's a great complement to it. Especially, what I presented on in South Korea was how this is an incredible resource as we're seeing an uptick in different mental health issues around specifically things like anxiety and depression. The more that we can teach and empower people to take their health and well-being into their own hands, in terms of just supplementing or complementing other medical interventions that they're receiving, this is just a bonus. If you're experiencing chronic anxiety or having trouble sleeping, I'm going to talk a little bit about the research of how spending this intentional, mindful time in nature can really, really support. This is just kind of a bird's eye view of showing some of the highlights of the research. At the beginning of my sessions, I love the research. I have that kind of just excitement about it. But I think there's something that's powerful about learning the why behind something. You know, when we were talking in the beginning, this is a practice that I believe is innate to all of us. I imagine that a lot of you on this call right now have experienced forest bathing in your own way, likely on your own, without any sort of guidance or without any sort of knowing of what the research is. Um, but the research can help kind of just amplify something that is so innate to us in a way that it's just making it even more powerful. If you have been following any of the research about how beneficial meditation and mindfulness is for our mental, emotional, and physical health, it's combining two practices that are just really supportive into one. Um, and then for people who are new to slowing down, who are maybe new to spending time in nature or new to anything meditation or mindfulness related, I like sharing the research as a way to let them know there's no wrong way to do this. Just by being out in the forest or a lot of these different natural environments, what the research is showing is that it's having an automatic beneficial impact on some of the things that are listed here, reducing stress and anxiety, decreasing depression, reducing blood pressure, helping with sleep issues, and supporting the immune response as well. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about why this practice is needed right now. Why do we have structured, intentional, scheduled time to go forest bathing? And the reason why is that we're just not doing it on our own. A lot of the research that I was working with was this was all before the pandemic, but the research was showing that the average American is spending less than 5% of their day outside. And that's not even in like neat, like in the forest, in the wilderness. It's like outside four walls, outside their home, outside of their office. Um, we don't need to go outside as much as we used to. We can get everything delivered to our front door. We are connecting with people around the world like we're connecting right now through these screens, which is very helpful, but sometimes it can also be a deterrent in like getting motivated to go outside. And this is a big shift from even a couple of decades ago. And 2008 was the transition in which people around the world started to transition from living in more rural, closer to nature, closer to the land spaces to now living in more urban, less access to natural spaces. It's predicted in the next couple of decades that it's going to be about 70+% of people around the world will be living in a dense urban environment. And so it's just less access to nature. It's not in our culture as much. We all have these devices that are attached at our hips. We're just living in a different time that has happened quite quickly. I mean, wasn't that long ago that kids were still playing outside until it got dark. That I was of that generation. I'm an elder millennial, and I remember that time. I remember life before the internet and all of that. And so it wasn't that long ago that we just automatically were in nature more often. And so that's why there's more intention around developing practices like this. And what's more is there's a lot of stressors out in the world right now. Uh, we can feel distracted. We can feel overwhelmed, overstimulated, disconnected, even though we're ironically more connected than ever than with with our devices. We're seeing that burnout is becoming more and more prevalent. I'm working with people from all over the world, all different types of professions, and the common theme is that people are tired. They're overwhelmed. They're feeling burnt out. This was happening before the pandemic. I just believe that it's become more since, and I think people are just developing more awareness around not wanting to be so exhausted all the time. Um, and then this isolation epidemic, the US Surgeon General a couple of years ago named isolation and loneliness the new smoking in the United States. There's some research that's showing that chronic isolation is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it's having a big impact on our physical health, our mental health, our longevity, and just our daily life, our daily, just how can we be satisfied with life? Being in this more isolated environment is having real issues for a lot of people. I just want to talk about the nervous system real quick because I think it's interesting how, as humans, I mean, even in the last, we just named 40 years, life has changed significantly. Uh, and throughout human evolution, our daily lives, how we operate has evolved quite a bit, but our nervous system hasn't changed for the most part since, hunter-gatherer times. It's designed to keep us safe, and it's hardwired to respond to immediate threats. Um, and so in our modern life, back in the day when like the nervous system was really getting us into that fight or flight mode when a predator was coming or there was actual danger, uh, that is being overstimulated, that the survival mechanisms and those stress centers are being overstimulated just from daily life of like again having these devices attached to us. We're constantly getting notifications about a lot of different things, whether it has to do directly with our life or just our greater world that we're a part of. And so this is having an impact on our feeling of being overwhelmed, the stress, the burnout, which is just kind of amplifying again the need to be more mindful about how can we address these feelings of chronic stress or overwhelm or feeling tired. All right, I'm going to transition to talking a little bit about some of my favorite research. I'm not going to talk about all of them, there's too much, but I'm going to just highlight a few of them because I find them really empowering for people. So I'm going to talk first about some of the benefits of really connecting to our sense of smell in nature. There's been some great research that, again, first started in Japan and has been growing around the world about these pretty incredible chemical compounds that trees emit that are called phytoncides. And phytoncides are, think of them as like essential oils coming off the tree. Um, they're actually activated when the tree is having a defense response against things like viruses or microbes or bacteria. And they're more powerful and they're more potent in coniferous trees like redwoods or pine, cedar or fir, but they are emitted by all trees. And the research is showing that exposure to phytoncides can lower our cortisol levels, our stress hormones, by up to 30% with just 20 minutes of exposure. And that reduction of cortisol continues the longer you're exposed to the phytoncides. And the research is showing that this impact can be studied and measured for days or even weeks after the exposure to the phytoncides. I remember reading this research and it's fitting that we're in the Christmas time, but I remember thinking like, oh, is that why we love having Christmas trees in our house so much? The smell of the trees is creating this sense of deep relaxation with the reduction of our stress hormone literally melting away from our body when not only we're smelling these phytoncides, but our skin is just absorbing them, our largest organ. There's some other great research that's showing how phytoncides can reduce anxiety, increase the pain threshold, boost natural killer T cells, boosting immune function. They have antibacterial properties and can help with lowering blood pressure. So, very helpful. I really like sharing this research. At the beginning of a session, like again, for folks who might be new to spending time in nature or new to slowing down in general. Sometimes I'll say the words mindfulness or meditation, and it could evoke a sense of stress or panic of like, I don't know how to do that. That seems really overwhelming. And it is hard. It's hard to slow down. We have As humans, it's been measured that we have tens of thousands of thoughts every single day. The average has been measured at around 50,000 thoughts in one day. Uh, a lot of these thoughts are repetitive, and a lot of these thoughts can not always be so kind to ourselves. And so there's something that's just really helpful about knowing that when we're sitting next to the trees or walking through the trees, these phytoncides are helping just reduce and melt the stress away from our body. No effort required, just happening naturally. I'm talking a little bit about the healing sounds of nature. So, there's some really great studies about how the sounds of birds or the sounds of flowing water, like what we're experiencing with all the creeks and rivers being full from all the rain we've received, um, this can help us recover from that activated sympathetic nervous system response when we go into that fight or flight. The sounds of nature can help us recover much quicker than when we're just in our regular city sounds. And what's more is if we listen to the sounds of nature on a regular basis, let's say when we're not in an activated stress response, what's happening is that it's helping turn on the parasympathetic part of our nervous system that rest and digest. Think of if you practice yoga, when we go into shavasana and you just get to let go and release, that's when the parasympathetic gets turned on, when you're feeling your shoulders start to feel less tense and you get to breathe a little bit easier. Um, and what's helpful about intentionally activating the parasympathetic part of our nervous system throughout our day is that we want a balance between the two. I think of the sympathetic nervous system as, it's like the gas pedal, like go, go, go. And the parasympathetic is like the brakes, like slowing things down. And so when we can intentionally slow things down in our nervous system throughout our day, it's helping build stress resilience so that when, not if, but when the next stressful thing happens, whether it's someone cutting us off in traffic or a tough email from our boss, whatever it might be, we can be more attuned to responding rather than just reacting. Uh, and so, even if you don't have access to going outside and listening to the sounds of nature on a regular basis, turn on YouTube, turn on, Spotify, like there's lots of mindfulness apps that are playing the sounds of nature. It doesn't really matter. I mean, yes, it's of course nice to be real in person, but sometimes we don't have access. And so even listening to the sounds from your home can have a really, really beneficial impact. And there's been some really cool research coming out recently about how, from an evolutionary standpoint, the sounds of birds can help us feel safe. Um, this has been kind of hardwired into our nervous system back in the hunter-gatherer days when we all lived outdoors as humans. Since birds have that bird's eye view, they could see if the T-Rex or another predator was coming. And so when they could see it, all the bird songs would stop. They were aware. And so there's been something hardwired in our nervous system that when we hear the sounds of birds, okay, we feel safe. There's safety around. There's no predators. So I loved reading about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how healing it is just to see nature. It's why I'm intentionally using the color green throughout my presentation and trying to put in as many beautiful images of nature from both Sonoma County and beyond. I like to talk about a study that was kind of a landmark study from the US in the 1980s about how either a window to nature or a picture or a painting of nature in a hospital room is having a really beneficial impact on the patient's recovery. They created this study in the 80s about creating a few different control groups. One control group, same type of surgery. All the patients had just undergone a gallbladder surgery. And one control group of patients had a hospital room where there was a view of nothing, the walls were blank. And then the other control group had either a window to nature, to a tree, or even just a picture or a painting of nature. And the research shows that the patients that had any sort of visual exposure to nature complained to the nurses less. They asked for less pain medication. And on average, they were discharged from the hospital a full day earlier than the patients that had no sort of visual exposure to nature. And so you may notice that when you go to your doctor's office or into a hospital setting, it's very intentional that there's pictures and paintings of nature all over the place. There's plants around, and we're seeing this increase. I went and visited a friend in a hospital earlier this year, and I noticed they had this beautiful bamboo forest in the middle of this brand new hospital. And so these again are just really nice, easy supplements to support health and healing. Um, for for many, many years, the color green has been associated with healing in multiple indigenous and spiritual traditions around the world. Again, from an evolutionary perspective, green helps us feel safe. When we see green, it's knowing that life is thriving through there, that there's water coming in, that other animals are able to be there. There's something about seeing the color green, that again just allows us to release and relax a little bit. And one of the theories behind all of this around why why do the sounds and the smells and the visuals of nature, why are they so beneficial for our health? And the theory is called the biophilia theory. And it talks about how since as humans, we co-evolved in nature for 99.999% of our evolution. And so the theory is that nature is embedded in our DNA. We are hardwired to feel connected to this planet. This planet has been our home for millennia. And so these feelings of peace, of safety, of refuge, is something that has been a part of our human history for a long time. We've just been separated from it only in recent years. So I love talking about the power of awe and why forest bathing is such an incredible way to tap into this. Um, in a few slides, I'm going to talk more about how you can practice what it means. But when we're slowing down, we notice more, especially when we're engaging with our senses, and giving ourselves permission to really soak in the beauty, soak in the things that make us go, wow. And so I put a few pictures that I took, of a beautiful sunset or this baby red-tailed hawk that visited my backyard many years ago. Nature has one of the most powerful ways to help us feel that sense of awe and wonder, especially when we're in person with it. I mean, seeing the images on the screen are beneficial, um, but being in person for that sunset, being in person for, that encounter with wildlife, or I have the redwood trees behind me on my green screen of like looking up and being like, wow, these trees are old and they've been here for a really long time. And the research around what's happening when we experience things like awe and wonder is from a physiological perspective, what's happening is our body is getting flooded with all the feel-good hormones. So think uh, endorphins and serotonin being elevated. And there's even some research that's showing that we have increased levels of oxytocin, that love connection hormone, because when we're in nature, and we're really opening up to the beauty of it, we're connecting to all the life that's there. That oxytocin is showing that we are connecting to all the different forms of life, whether it's the trees or the plants or the different birds or animals. Um, we've forgotten that, life comes in many different forms, and that feeling of connection doesn't have to always just be human to human. It can extend into the more than human world. And the research is showing that some of the highlights here, that when we experience awe, we're happier, we have health benefits from it. I love this feeling of humility that comes through. I know that maybe some of you can relate to this, but when I go to the redwood forest or I'm standing on the cliff in front of the ocean, and it's so big and it's so expansive, and it helps me feel really small. And that feels good. It feels good to not like have my world be the main attraction in what's going on, to remember this deep connection to uh a much bigger world and universe that we're connected to. Um, and so just want to share, these are some of the most basic ways to practice forest bathing. The emphasis is really about slowing down. Uh, a lot of times I'm a big hiker as well. I love going on my big hikes and getting my steps in and getting, my cardiovascular health. Like 100% am here for that. Forest bathing is not that. We're not pushing ourselves to get a bunch of steps. Um, we're not pushing ourselves to get to the top of the mountain, to get to the vista point. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip real quick. It's really about focusing more on the journey rather than getting to the destination. And so slowing things down, seeing if we can turn our phones off, uh, and really focusing on opening up our senses as the way to connect to the natural world we're a part of. Um, the senses are a powerful way to help regulate our nervous system. This is a technique that's often used when someone is having a panic attack. They will be instructed to notice three different things that they see, three different things that they smell, etc. And so the reason is that when we go into our senses, it's not that our thoughts will completely, stop and disappear. It's just that when we go into our senses, our thoughts can't keep us hostage the same way. When we go into our senses, it's like, okay, oh yeah, like I'm smelling this thing. I feel the earth underneath my body. I feel the air, the sun against my skin. And it's helping you come back into this moment. I feel safe. And what's beyond that, when you're tapping into the senses, when you're not in that activated stress response, if you're engaging with your senses, when you're already feeling like, okay, I'm not in an acute situation, you're able to tune into the things that are evoking a sense again of that awe, that wonder, that beauty, and it's helping you come into presence, which, let's be real, is hard to do, especially in 2024. Uh, we've got a lot of distractions out there, and I think it's a pretty normal and common human experience to be thinking about the past or worrying about the future. Uh, and so, what do all of these different ancient traditions around meditation and mindfulness talk about? It's about coming into this moment, coming into now, um, and engaging with our senses, and being in a beautiful natural environment is a really powerful way to be just in this moment, to not be working a million miles per minute to try and predict the future, figure out the past. And so some ways that I think are really helpful to engage in this practice are being really curious. Curiosity is an amazing tool. I think just in life, right, where we don't get so stuck in our day to day, like, this is the way it is. Bringing curiosity, even if you're walking through a forest or a park or even your own backyard, a place that you've been many, many times before, like, bring that curiosity of, like, I wonder what's new today, or noticing how things are changing throughout the season. Um, Playfulness is also really helpful. Kids, especially really young kids, and they know this practice. Like if you see a toddler, uh, going through not just a forest, but anywhere where like it'll take them a very long time to get from point A to point B because they are wanting to touch everything and smell and just really are in that present moment of exploration and wonder. Um, so remembering that we all did that at one point in our life, we were all once that toddler. And there's something that's really helpful about using playfulness in this form of meditation and mindfulness. This isn't a serious practice. This isn't something like I'm going to get really good at this and I'm going to time the clock and I'm going to, be the best. It's, taking that all aside and just allowing yourself to just be. Um, and playfulness kind of takes the pressure off a little bit. Um, and then openness to experience something new in a new way can be very helpful. And then seeing if you can notice anything that inspires joy, that awe and wonder again. What feels peaceful? What feels easy? And then go towards that. Like spend time with that. If there is something that evokes that beauty or that joy, don't just rush through it. Go and actually again engage with all of your senses, taking even if it's just for a moment. So often we're fast. We want to get to the top of the mountain. Um, See what you can find along the way that delights you. And just remember, there's no wrong way to do this. There's never a session of forest bathing where you're like, oh man, I really messed that up. Even if you bring your phone out, like it all is working towards just getting you back into nature. Even if it feels hard at first, sometimes when I'm guiding participants, it takes a moment or several moments for them to like allow their mind to settle to get that voice out of the head that's like I need to go do something. Like so often we are we're focused on doing or achieving or being productive that just simply being, that giving ourselves permission to do nothing nothing um can feel really hard. It could feel uncomfortable. It could feel challenging to walk slowly. So just give yourself permission. Just notice it. That's how I advise in guiding when I'm guiding folks. If the thoughts are coming in or that critical voice that's saying go fast or go do something more, just notice that and then come back to noticing through your senses. When I'm guiding people, they get to have me help them guide them back into the moment. But even if you're on your own, just keeping that compassionate awareness for yourself. I wanted to share just some of the benefits of working with a guide and being in a group. Um, when you're in a guided session, it creates some more structure, and it's sad to me that we need help, that humans need help in slowing down and reconnecting with nature. But the reality is a lot of people do. I mentioned I'm working with people from all over the world. Oftentimes in this tourism setting, Sonoma County is a global destination, and so people are drawn to coming here for a variety of reasons. But it often takes them some time to put their phone down, to stop checking their work email or stop checking, social media. These devices are really, really addictive. And I'm not separate from that. I feel it every day where I have to bring that mindfulness of like, oh yeah, I've been in front of my screen for a long time. And so having a guide helps because you're kind of given that accountability of like, oh, everyone else is doing this or I'm with someone else. So I'm not going to check my phone for an hour or two. And then working with a guide, we create these different sensory invitations, which are designed to help people just go a little bit deeper into that curiosity or engaging with the senses. Um, and then there's a space for group sharing and connection. Oftentimes when I'm working with a group, I'll ask just really simple questions, but there's something really powerful about being witnessed and witnessing each other in this practice. I like to say that forest bathing can be really similar to, other meditation practices or something like yoga, in that once you learn some of the basic tools and techniques, you could do it every day completely on your own. But there can be something that's really supportive about being in a class with being with a guide. I know I feel a difference when during the pandemic and my yoga studio is closed, and I'm on my laptop and I'm practicing on my own, and if I could do like 20 minutes by myself, I felt good about that because it was hard to stay focused on my own, to be honest. But when I'm in a group, when I'm in a class in person with a teacher and other people who are practicing aside me, there's an energy that's building. We're supporting each other. We're all, kind of holding each other accountable that we're going to stick with the practice. And a guided forest bathing session is pretty similar. And then it also kind of helps bring validity to what you're experiencing. I ask participants what nature means to them, what their relationship to nature is. How does it feel like a space of peace or healing? And there's something that's really beautiful about hearing each other's answers, or after we go through a guided invitation together of asking people what they noticed. And it's a way to keep things more alive and to integrate the experience in real time. And then there's some benefits of, creating community. I mentioned earlier that we're living in this time where people are more isolated and lonely than ever. And so being with a group can increase those feelings of community, and then just working towards collective healing. These are challenging times for a lot of people, and so being able to come together as a group and to connect and slow down together, to connect with the forest or the ocean or wherever we're at, connecting with the land, connecting with ourselves and each other can be a pretty powerful catalyst in our collective healing. And then the research is showing that, the health benefits that I mentioned earlier are most notable when you spend about 20 minutes a day or a total of 140 minutes throughout the week, being in nature in this very slow, mindful way. But I like to let people know just to start with small. Like if you don't have 20 minutes, that's okay. Don't let that deter you from going outside for even just 1 or 2 minutes. It could be your backyard. It could be a park that's nearby. I live in Northwest Santa Rosa, so we have the Santa Rosa Creek that's going through our subdivision, and there's a bunch of trees there, and there's water flowing, and sometimes I'll see the river otters, and you know, see what feels easy to you. Start there and go through your senses. Um, this next slide's some more ways of how you can incorporate this into your daily life. So even just setting the intention, of I'm going to have a daily nature moment or whatever you want to name it. Um, Again, this emphasis on just starting small and easy. It's the best way to start any new habit is just aim for small and easy. Your body and your mind will start to crave it. So it'll be easier to increase the length of time just naturally. So you don't have to start with like, I'm going to go on a 2 hour hike every week and do that. Like, if that feels easy, great. But if it doesn't, see what feels accessible, even if it's taking your morning coffee or tea outside into your backyard or even next to your house plant. If you don't feel like going outside, I know it's cold out. Um, but I've been trying to push myself this winter, and uh, and going on hikes in the morning or going on solo forest bathing sessions and like bundling up, wear some extra clothes. There's way less people and there's something magical about it. You can practice this while you're walking. You can be seated. Um, and the emphasis is really about focusing on your senses. See what you're smelling. What does the earth feel like underneath your body while you're walking or maybe while you're seated on the ground? Noticing the temperature of the air as it makes contact with your skin or your clothes. Um, and then keeping a journal can be really helpful of like, oh, what am I noticing in nature every day? Or, oh, what are my wow no moments in nature every day? There's lots of cool research about why writing is such an incredible practice for integrating new habits. And, with with anything, where we put our attention is where our energy goes towards. And so if we are taking time to write it down, we're kind of training our base consciousness. We're training our body and our mind to like, oh, this is something that feels really good. And it will, again, start to crave it more naturally. See if you can leave your phones behind. If you can't, try and put it on airplane mode or do not disturb, even if it's just for a few minutes. And again, just focusing on what feels easy, what's beautiful, what evokes a sense of joy or awe or wonder. Um, Focus on that. Spend time with that feeling. So we're gonna spend just a minute in trying this out together. I realize it's not the same in this digital format of as being in the middle of one of our beautiful forests here in Sonoma County, but I'm going to guide us through a really quick sensory awareness experience so that you can kind of get a felt sense of how you can practice this on your own. And we're going to do it for like a minute. That's how quick some of the benefits can happen. Um, so before we start, usually I'm guiding people throughout to notice their different senses, but I feel like with the sound of this video on the screen, I might be competing with the sound. So I'm going to just kind of give some of the instructions, excuse me, before I start the video. And then I'm just going to be quiet for about 30 seconds to a minute. And I'm just going to allow you to start the forest bathing on your own. I'm going to start us by taking just a few slow and deep breaths together. And then after we take a few breaths, I'm going to invite you to feel the weight of your body just start to settle into your seat. I imagine a lot of you are inside right now. So just imagining the earth underneath you, underneath the foundation of your home or wherever you're at. Just feeling the weight of your body start to sink in. And then I'll be inviting you to allow your eyes to slowly start to gaze towards the screen, taking in the visuals of the colors of the moss, the green, the water flowing, noticing the different sounds, maybe imagining the temperatures of the air in the forest, maybe the sense of a cool air or maybe the sun coming through. Maybe even imagining the different smells. So as you allow your body just to relax, let's just take one slow, deep breath together. And then I'll play the video and allow you just to open all of your senses to noticing. So allowing an inhale and releasing slowly with an exhale. And then we'll transition to noticing the video. As we start to wind down the presentation, I just wanted to share a few resources for you if you're interested in learning more. I have on my website, which I'll share a link to my website on the next slide. I've collected a lot of the different research in my final project and my thesis during my master's program. You can access it there. And then these are a few of my favorite books. Dr. Ching Lee is one of the doctors from Japan who's been such an instrumental leader into this. I love Florence Williams' book, The Nature Fix. I think she makes it really accessible and easy. And then Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv. If you have any interest in how nature is impacting kids, and specifically a lack of nature is impacting kids. He's coined a term called nature deficit disorder, and I really, really love his work. The links for all of this will be on my website, which is here, ecowisdomwellness.com. This QR code will take you to that website as well. This is my email. I'm happy to be a resource if you have any questions or need any support in being pointed in the right direction. I do guide sessions for individuals and groups all throughout Sonoma County. So you can find information about that on my website. And then in the spring, I'll be partnering with Sonoma Land Trust. We're going to start offering some guided forest bathing sessions in different spaces around the county, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So stay tuned for more information about that as that gets unveiled. And then before I hand it back to Anya, I'm gonna just ask a few questions. We're gonna have some space for Q&A. Um, and so anything that you want to share, anything about this practice or any of the research or information that I share, if you want to share what resonates with you about it, I'd love to hear. Um, if you have any ideas of how you can bring more nature into your daily life, or if you just have any general questions, we'll be hanging out for the next half hour or so for folks who want to stay on for the Q&A. And then before I pass it back to Anya, I'm just going to share again, just start small. Even a few minutes of slowing down and being in nature can have a really big impact on both your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. Um, Even just a few minutes a day, if you did that for a full month, that adds up to a lot. So thank you all for being here tonight. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and I'll pass it back to you, Anya.
Thanks so much, Jenny. That was fantastic. I learned a lot. So for everybody attending, a reminder that we do have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be monitoring the chat as well. We'll give everybody a few minutes if they want to put any other responses to Jenny's prompts or questions. I will be reading those aloud if you want to answer her questions or ask a question. But a few things before we jump into the Q&A, just want to remind everybody that if you want to sign up for the Next Language of the Land webinar, you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, and you can do so on our website at sonomalandtrust.org. And all of our on the land outings will also be posted on there at sonomalandtrust.org/outings. And of course, you can stay engaged with all of our projects through social media accounts by following at Sonoma Land Trust on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we'll have this recording and previous recordings of other Language of the Land webinars on our YouTube page. And Sonoma Land Trust is a nonprofit organization, which means we rely on your donations from community members, businesses, and foundations to make our work possible. If you like what you heard today, please consider donating. Your gift helps us support land protection and preservation. You can make a donation online on our website. If you visit sonomalandtrust.org, there will be a click donate button. And thank you so much for all of your participation and support over these years. During these uncertain times, we appreciate every one of you. So, Jenny, fantastic. I have so many questions for you myself. I wish I was in a forest right now doing a forest bath, but thank you for that little moment of mindfulness. That was great. I wanted to just kick off a question. One of the beautiful things about Sonoma County is we have so many different ecosystems from the mountains, the Mayacamas to the coastal, ranges. We have the baylands with lots of different wildlife and waterways. What is the ideal context? Like, what kind of surroundings make a great forest bath? What's the landscape? Are there trails? What is your weather that you like? Can you explain some of your ideal conditions?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And especially with the vast diversity of ecosystems that we have, we're so lucky to have access to in our community. And so there is some extra benefit about being around these coniferous trees that I mentioned earlier, of especially the power of the phytoncides, these chemical compounds that they're emitting. And so going to the redwood forests or any spaces like that are helpful to get that added benefit. One of my, two of my favorite spots for redwoods are, of course, Armstrong Woods. I am there pretty much every week. I lead a forest bathing session in Guerneville on Sunday mornings, and I go to Armstrong pretty much every time afterwards, and that's just my go-to. And so being with the redwoods is really nice. I'll usually go, when I'm guiding sessions, I don't normally bring people to Armstrong Woods because it is a little bit more crowded, especially in that main, walking through the big trees on the ground, forest floor. So in terms of other ideal things to look for or trails, ideally it's going to spaces that aren't, full of a lot of crowds or big like recreation activities. If I go to Armstrong Woods just by myself, like I'll go to the East Ridge Trail and I normally won't, I'll see maybe five other people in 3 hours. And then I'll find spots kind of off the trail where I can go sit next to, the flowing creek and, any place where you have some extra space to one feel safe to slow down, and so I know it's not everyone will feel like that's accessible to go to a space where like there's no one else around. I mean, it's taken me years to build up that skill in myself of just kind of trusting. For some people, it might be really easy where they're like, get me out there, get me to the place where no one else is. So if you do find that being around some other people or knowing that there's a park ranger or someone else nearby, I would invite people to just kind of trust, again, this emphasis on what feels easy. Like if going to the busy Armstrong Woods feels safer, do that. Like go there. It's an amazing place. In terms of other types of ecosystems, I mean, I love going up to Sugarloaf Bridge State Park. That's one of my all-time favorites. Just that feeling of being in this more mountainy area and then the meadows and the creeks going through. They have the waterfalls flowing. I do bring people out to the ocean as well. Uh, and so there is a lot of, emphasis on the forest itself because of some of the specific interactions with these types of trees. But I like to tell people, like, if the ocean is your happy place, go there. Like if that feels like that's where you feel most at peace and ease, or like just do that. Like, I mean, that's why I like to mention even your backyard is an accessible and ideal place to do this too. Like, I think the key is really just around what feels easy, what feels inspiring, and then maybe start to venture out to other locations. But yeah, forest, ocean, bay, mountains. It's kind of dealer's choice in my mind.
Yeah, we're definitely very privileged to live in Sonoma County with all of these wonderful different places, both recreationally with, lots of support and help if needed, and some more secluded areas also. A couple people in the chat were talking about, how do we be, what is the best form? And I think like there's some people who mentioned that even just being mindfully walking is more helpful than sometimes being still and sitting for a long time. And one question is, how do you get people to sit on the ground and just come down to earth, like just be comfortable in that space? That's one of the questions brought to us by a wildlife ambassador at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. And, bringing people to a space and then also sitting for a long time is, challenging. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that's where being guided can be helpful. Is that, for a lot of people, it is hard to slow down. And especially like coming to sit on the earth is not something most of us do as adults anymore, where it's like we sit on the chairs, even if we're in nature, it's finding the more comfortable things. So what I do with my sessions is I try and make it as comfortable as possible on the ground. And, so having a nice waterproof picnic blanket. I like the little back check chairs. Those like they're the best. Where they're super light and they're really easy to carry with you, and then you get a little bit of the back support. I find is helpful for me to sit on the ground for a long period of time. And then I've gotten some feedback from people. This actually happens a lot where when they first sit on the ground and they share this at the end of the guided sensory awareness experience, which oftentimes we do seated. All and then all some people will like to lay down for that part too, which makes it a little bit easier of like again just orienting people to finding what feels comfortable. And so if sitting like on the ground is like, I hate this, like go stand up, like do something that feels more accessible. But the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of participants is that they've noticed that when they first are on the ground, it feels uncomfortable. And then when they go through the guided sensory awareness experience, which is at least 20 minutes, they kind of forget about it. And then their body, then they have this feeling of deep relaxation and of the earth holding them and supporting them. So it's like this friction point that shifts of like, oh, my back hurts or this feels weird to like, oh, actually like there's something really beautiful happening and feeling this deeper support. And then the difference between, if it does feel hard to be seated, especially if you're on your own practicing, I think walking is a great way to do this. Um, I'll encourage people even if they're taking their daily walk and we all do this. I do this too, of like, I'll listen on my headphones to a podcast or even take work calls while we're walking. Again, encouraging people just to start slow. Like, see if you could take your headphones out for even a couple of minutes and going through the senses, helping you come back into presence, as you're walking, like touching the bark of the tree or feeling, the air, the sun on your face or skin. Um, Again, it's just helping people like shift from that like go, 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 go. Do like we're used to doing things and being productive even in nature. So again, just orienting to what feels easy, what feels more accessible, and then kind of playing with it of like, And that's why I'm encouraging people to start slow. But if walking feels like the accessible way, perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, we also had a um, attendee share that, requiring people to sit isn't always, you know, um, necessary, that even just standing comfortably or using one of the trees nearby to balance. Or I like to also just sit at the base of the tree if I need that extra support, if my body's feeling extra exhausted. And that guest also mentioned that she likes to begin her land management seminars for SSU with at least 3 minutes of forest bathing. That it's amazing to see how quickly the shoulders relax and the focus becomes easier, particularly for students and for the teachers. So that's a wonderful way to incorporate this into our regular, lives. Another question came in about bringing animals. Like, how do you feel about bringing a dog along with, as an accompaniment to your forest bathing?
Yeah, that's a great question. A woman who is a nature and forest therapy guide. She wrote a book about exactly that. It's called Forest Bathing with your dog.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I think that animals do this naturally, like on their, it's just they're hardwired for this. And so I think it works really well if you're one on your own, like say you're walking your dog, or you're spending time with your cat or other animals, even in your own backyard. And like, I love working. I have two cats. Like, animals, I think, are one of the most powerful ways to come back into this present moment because they're so heart-centered. Like, they just are they're emanating love all of the time. And so if that feels like a helpful tool to help you as the human individual come back into the present moment, I say yes, go for it. The for group sessions, it would be tricky unless everyone brought their dogs. I don't think I would when I'm doing a group session, I wouldn't have just one person bring a dog. Just because it may be distracting for the other participants unless there was an agreement amongst everyone. But yeah, I say go for it. Like I hear from a lot of my participants that they do this naturally with their dogs when they're going on walks and like, and the dog wants to stop every 2 seconds to mark the territory to go, to the different things that happen with that. And so using them as like the guide of like, all right, you want to stop every 2 seconds. Okay. Every time we stop, I'll take a moment to take a breath or I'll take a moment to reconnect to my senses. So yeah, I think they're great teachers for a lot of things.
That's fantastic. And I have a little trickier question for you. Um, one of our attendees asked if you know if any health insurance plans that cover forest bathing sessions as a form of therapy.
Not yet. And I say yet because it is my vision and I know a lot of shared visions for people in this field that it one day is. I have been working locally with Kaiser the last couple of years, not for patient care yet. But I've run a few programs for their employees for that employee wellness because healthcare workers have been going through a lot, especially since the pandemic. And so I know that that Kaiser and other healthcare systems talk about forest bathing in their like member services in terms of something they're encouraging. And there is a parks prescription program in Sonoma County, um, where you can talk to your doctor, and it's not the same as what's happening in Japan, but they will write you a prescription for a nature prescription, and it'll get you free parking to a lot of the regional parks or up at the state up at Sugarloaf or other state parks. I know that Sugarloaf is offering, I don't know if it's monthly now, but they are offering some guided forest bathing sessions that people can use their park's prescription for, so that it's completely free and all of that. So it's small now. I mean, it's challenging. Our healthcare system is challenging. I don't know the nice way to say that. But I have hope that it will one day become something that is covered because, what we're seeing is that there is a rising need for mental health support, and we just don't have enough clinicians to meet the demand, unfortunately. And a lot of clinicians are getting quite burnt out. And so we're at this like really interesting point where more people are aware of the need to seek mental health support more than, I mean, that was, I think, something that the pandemic highlighted is like, we need to take care of this. This is no longer a taboo topic. But unfortunately, we don't have enough services to meet the need. And so my hope is that this is something that becomes covered, that can be integrated into our healthcare systems. Like in Japan and in South Korea, they're offering a more federal model of subsidizing, access and programs. And so we're working on it. If anyone on this call has any ideas, or yeah, works in healthcare and wants to chat, I would love to have a discussion like that. I think the more people are aware of this as a modality and the therapeutic values it provides. And I mean, and it is incredibly cost effective. If like we do this group model, um, and then it's again empowering people with ways to continue doing it on their own so that they're not reliant on a class or reliant on another provider for their mental and physical health. I think is an important thing that we all need to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all those things that you mentioned are huge steps for Sonoma County residents and people who are visiting Sonoma County. So that's fantastic. And I'm glad you're sharing those resources. It does look like one of our guests is also saying that the forest bathing does happen monthly, except not during the winter, but the park prescription is free for forest bathing.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for crowdsourcing resources for all of our guests. And another participant is asking for other additional resources you may have. Um, can you suggest sources for simple, basic sensory awareness activities or scripts for using with small groups of kids on walks in nature?
Hmm. That's a great question. There are a handful of organizations that are specific for kids. And I'm connected with them on LinkedIn, and I can't remember the name of them right now. But
That's just a plug to follow Jenny on
yeah,
LinkedIn.
yeah, I can or send me an email and I will do my best to connect. But yeah, especially for kids. I mean, I've worked predominantly with adults. I've done some family sessions with, parents and their kids. And so the without being able to direct them to an exact guide or resource right now, just saying that making everything much shorter is key. Of like, oftentimes I'll do like a 15-20 minute sensory experience with adults. I wouldn't do more than like 5 minutes with kids. And then when we're out, and then when they're not a lot of sitting, more movement, more walking around, and making it the emphasis on like the playfulness and the fun, like an activity that someone shared with me recently that I thought was brilliant is they were in somewhere in Europe and they were being guided with their kids, and they were all sent out to like go kind of on a scavenger hunt of finding five different things in the forest that really felt like appealing to them or fun, and then they brought it back into the group when they came back after about 20 or 25 minutes. And the woman who told me this, who was the mom, was just like, I would have never expected my kids to like this. Like they're 8 and 10 years old, so they're used to being on screens a lot. And they said that they still talk about what an impact it was, of how fun it was, because they like brought their little items back, and then they made a little like mandala, like kind of incorporating some of the principles around art therapy into the practice with kids is really helpful. There's this whole field of eco art therapy, of like ways that you can like go into that more fun, playful expression using different objects in nature. So I would, yeah, send me an email and I can send some of the organizations that I think are doing a really great job with kids.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. And I think that's very easy to kind of shorten everything down for their attention spans, but really lean into the interactive play aspect. I have a question for you about like what do you recommend as like aftercare after one of your sessions, or if you're going on kind of a longer forest bath, hike or walk? What do you recommend to do like after that session before, coming back into the busyness of our days?
Great question. Yeah, transitions are important, and so often in life we're just moving from point A to point B. And so being mindful about the transition, I think, is an integral part of the practice. And so when I'm guiding, we'll often do like a tea at the end, where we'll have a tea that it's a forest inspired tea, whether it's from plants or herbs picked directly from that forest, or if that forest doesn't have a lot, I'll be able to get. I go to Rosemary's Garden a lot for more local. We're so lucky to have such an abundance of plants and herbs here. So the tea is helpful to come back into our bodies. It's something warm. We're kind of like during the session, it can get more into that ethereal space of like more of that liminal space of like moving into to more of that kind of deeper connection. But before people get back into their cars and like transition back into to their lives, the tea is really helpful to kind of ground them in, of having something warm. And then usually what we'll do is just have some like lighter conversation of like how, maybe brainstorming ideas of ways to incorporate it. And then when I'm sending people off and they're done with the session, I think a great practice just is to get a journal. Like that's what I mentioned before, to have that nature journal or the wow journal. One of my meditation teachers talks about how writing is one of the most powerful ways to bring our body, through writing, our speech and our mind, into coherence, into congruence with each other. And so let's say you had a guided session for a couple of hours, or you went on your own for a couple of hours in the forest before transitioning back to your life or work or family, whatever it might be. If you could take even just 10 to 20 minutes of writing it down, not only just note like saying what you noticed during the experience, but allowing that flow of creativity, of that train of thought. I mean, I have my best ideas when I'm by myself in a forest. Like it is inspiring a lot of creativity, a lot of clarity. And I get that feedback from a lot of participants too, where they're just like, oh, wow, like that all of a sudden, this problem that's been weighing on me for a long time, there's just a spark of like, huh, okay, like I can breathe through this, or I have an idea of how to move through it. Um, so write it down. You won't, so you don't, one, so you don't forget it. And then two, you know, integration is really an important part of any sort of healing or transformation journey. Um, and so the writing can really be helpful with integrating. And that's why, as guides, we facilitate some of the connection, people to share what they're noticing. That's helping to integrate the experience throughout the session as well.
Was a really great suggestion. Thank you. And I know we're getting close to the end of time. And so I have one last question for you. It's going answer as short as you need to, but I know that you combined with your work guiding these forest baths and the trauma-informed care that you provide at the Integrative Healers Action Network is doing a lot of collective healing in Sonoma County. So I just would like to know if like what is your vision of what Sonoma County looks like in the next 20 years? How does this work help help us all heal? What does it look like?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, I'll just start off by saying that I mean this is home for me. I grew up in Sonoma County, and I moved away a handful of times, and I just kept coming back because this is home. I love the land here. I love the community and the people, and I feel, especially as there's so much going on in our nation, in the world right now, as things continue to kind of using the language of Joanna Macy, who is an elder, uh, you know, Buddhist scholar, environmental, like she's an incredible leader in the spaces of transformation and healing and collective change. And she calls this the time of great change right now. We're going through a big collective shift. And so I feel really grateful that we have so much access to open, wild, natural spaces here. And one of the reasons that I've stayed, especially after all the fires that we've had, there was a moment where my husband and I were like, should we go somewhere else? And I was like, no, this community knows how to show up. Like we saw that after the fires, especially of, so many people that wanted to come up and help and support and um bring healing to the land, to the humans here. And so I mean, my vision for our community over the next 20 years is that we really focus on our local community. I've been thinking a lot about, our recent election and things that maybe feel a little bit more challenging or even scary at times. And I'm choosing to focus my energy on the things that I can have an influence over. And I think that if we focus on our local community, and there's so many amazing uh, thought leaders and trailblazers and visionaries and advocates. I mean, Sonoma County has, what is it, per capita, the largest amount of nonprofits in California. Like, we have a lot of people here who want to help. So I think the more we collaborate and work together and support each other's missions um, and bring in the community to help kind of direct like what's needed, like where are the gaps in care, what are the gaps in access to the resources that are needed. um I think it's just envisioning more and more of that kind of mutual aid effort of like, all right, like we're here to support one another. And it gives me hope. I mean, it really does in this time. I feel really grateful to live here and to be a part of this community. And so that's a short a short answer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
We talk a
definitely
lot about that, but that's short.
a thought for inspiration, and I hope that everyone participating today took away a little bit of inspiration from your presentation. Thank you so much. A lot of people are expressing that in the chat right now. Thanking you for all of your resources and your information and your thoughtfulness and your presentation. And thank you on behalf of Sonoma Land Trust for joining us. And thank you everybody who stayed for the till the end of this Q&A. Um, you guys are fantastic supporters, and we really appreciate you being here. Reminder that this will be recorded. You can watch it later. And thank you so much for Camila for interpreting for our Spanish-speaking audience. We appreciate you and your time. Thank you, Ingrid and Kylie, for running the show behind the scenes and keeping us all professional and looking great and well organized. So, see you next time and have a wonderful night, everybody.